The advice provided in this podcast is general in nature. For your specific situation, you will need to get in contact with your local OT, vehicle modifier or mobility dealer and set yourself up with an assessment or a trial. Trials really do put you in the driver's seat, so get out there and get one going. Before we get started, we just want to do a quick shout out to our sponsors who make this show possible: Mobility Engineering, Driving Well, and Williams OT. This show takes time and money to put together, and we are forever grateful for their passion for our industry. Okay, enough of the business. Let's get on to the interview with Jenny and Brad.
G'day and welcome to the DriveAble Podcast. 100 episodes. My name is Brad Williams from Williams OT, and joining me for her 20th episode is Jenny Gribben from Driving Well in Queensland. How are you, Jenny?
I'm good, Brad. How are you?
I'm really good. I mean, can't believe it's been 100 episodes in the making of this podcast. It's across 3 years of doing so, and a massive shout out to Ali, who's, spoiler alert, he's going to join us for our next episode, and we're going to talk about what he's been up to over the last year and where he's been and what he's been doing, because I know he's been an extremely busy man with all his adventures in life. So we're going to bring him on, and we're going to talk about what's happening in his world and the 100 episodes. But today, Jenny, we've got a special. Well, we've got a new guest, another guest.
Every guest is special, Brad.
Yeah, he's a special guest.
Today we're talking to a lady called Anne Klose, and she is an NDIS participant. She has. I'll let her tell her about herself, but she is a client that's gone through a driving and vehicle modifications process to support her as her disability needs have changed. So she's got an amazing story to tell, and I'm really looking forward to being able to share her experience with all of our listeners.
Like this episode, knowing a little bit about Anne's story, because Anne has been through a big journey that a lot of people might be in different stages of along their journey, from the first time getting hand controls to upgrading hand controls in cars, and then also moving on into a van from wheelchair. So lots to unpack. Should we get it started?
Let's do it.
Mobility Engineering is Australia's leading automotive product supplier for disability customers. We have installers all across the country, over 100 of them, and we have the largest range of mobility products for vehicles in the country. Get in touch with Mobility Engineering for any of your driving solutions.
Good morning, everyone. We are back. We're very excited to have our guest Anne here today. Good morning, Anne. How are you?
Good morning. Doing very well, thank you.
That's wonderful. Anne, can you start with telling us a bit about yourself?
So, I live in glorious Wellington Point in Brisbane with hubby, and we have, who's a great guy, engineer, very useful person to have around when you've got a disability. We have 2 grown sons and 4 grandchildren, the latest of whom was only born a month ago now. So that's all very exciting, just in time before Christmas. Mm-hmm. I occupy myself with family, of course, but also I'm a lecturer at a Bible college over on the other side of town. So we'll get to that, I'm sure, with the driving stuff. That's part-time, and I also provide supervision and mentoring for people in Christian ministry. So plenty to keep me occupied, but also some good flexibility in there for me, depending on how I'm feeling on a particular day.
Yeah.
And you're living with, you mentioned disability, Anne, so you're living with a disability. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, so I have a form of muscular dystrophy, FSHD, Facioscapulohumeral Dystrophy, and it's the most common form of muscular dystrophy. which can surprise some people. Oftentimes people think that muscular dystrophy only affects boys because we've tended to hear about the Duchenne type. So I became aware of this in my later teens, started having trouble with ankles rolling and shoulders threatening to dislocate, and was diagnosed around then, so quite a while ago now. And it's a gradually progressive disability and varies enormously in terms of how it impacts people. And for me, it's been a case of gradually that journey unfolding, starting to use mobility devices in my 40s. And then mostly that was little mobility scooters to help me get around the place. And then gradually moving towards wheelchair use and obviously needing to change how I was driving.
And for people that are just listening and not watching, did you mind sharing your age? Because you mentioned,
Yeah, I'm 64. I'm 64. So I said when I had my birthday in September, now I know the answer to the Beatles perennial question.
When I'm 64.
The answer is yes, apparently.
Oh, good. It's still keeping you.
Very good.
Lots of changes for you over the years.
There has. And I mean, in one way, I think that makes things a little easier, in that, you get to gradually adapt, and something else, I struggle to do, and we go, okay, how do we solve this particular problem? It's certainly challenging and increasingly so as the years go by. I recognize that, because it hasn't happened all at once, I have had the chance to make those changes. But I was thinking in preparation for this, one of the things that I've learned in needing to do that is that whenever there's a significant step change for me, my initial reaction tends to be, oh no, that's another loss. And I feel anxious and concerned about, well, what happens now? But then as we work our way through things, and with the help of people like yourselves, we find ways through. And in the end, it's actually better than it was, because it had been something, whatever it was that I'd been struggling with. And to find a solution, although, it felt like a loss, it has oftentimes brought a lot of relief. And so, and that's certainly part of the driving thing.
And hi, by the way, I haven't said anything yet. It's been fascinating listening to you. How do you know when it's time to do something with a progressive condition? How do you know that it's time to seek help? Where do you get other people telling you? Do you feel it in yourself? How do you know when to seek some advice to make some changes?
Yeah. For me, it's tended to be about years ago, I discovered that, my pride was going to get in the way. This was early on. I think I was in my 20s or 30s. And I was going, no, I'm not going to use a wheelchair. No, I'm not going to do this. No, I'm not going to, get hand controls, whatever it was. And then, the thing that occurred to me was, what do I need to do to live my best life? To make the very best of this situation. And I started then to have a more positive attitude towards that sort of thing. But for instance, it was when I was still walking around the house, And, I was leaving hand marks on the walls and having falls, and, it just was not good. So I got to that stage and went, no, okay, now I need to start using a mobility device inside. With the driving, it was that I knew that my legs, my feet weren't working well, and that driving had become a real, very tiring and a source of stress. So for me, that was a sign then to say, okay, now it's time to do something. Though it was one of the hardest ones, I have to say, making the decision to go and explore, for me, the red bells, the whole lot was going on, in terms of, this is going to be a significant loss. But once I got into the system of going, okay, there are options here, and there are ways forward, that was really encouraging. So I think a combination of recognizing the difficulties and getting the information about the possibilities, the combination of those two things coming together probably makes for a good decision about when and how to make those changes.
Is it all you, Anne, or did someone else help you make a decision as well? Did someone else point it out to you? Can you remember back that when it was happening?
No, it was mostly self-driven, and just recognizing that this is getting too hard. And obviously then, there's a safety concern as well. So yeah.
This is pre-NDIS. What was it like at that time of your life in regards to finding the information that you needed and giving it a go? How readily available was it?
I think it was an internet search at that stage, and working through that process, finding a driving OT back then. So when we're talking, I've got a date here, 2016. So, that this stuff was starting to become a little more available, but certainly pre-NDIS, there was, very little funding. We got some funding from the state government for my first lot of hand controls. But yeah, it was a case of go looking and, not a lot of general information around.
Where was your medical professional through this part, like your doctor, your GP, your specialist? What were their thoughts in this at this period and point in time?
To be honest, although, I've always had supportive GPs, there wasn't a lot of awareness around this stuff back then. And, still today, I would say that most of the steps I take are driven by, my awareness of what's going on for me. And then, being involved, Facebook groups, all those sorts of things, you start to see what's available. We take ourselves off every now and then to a disability expo and have a look and see what's around, that kind of thing.
Yeah. And so you're mainly in control of all your driving. What is it? Do you have regular medical reviews, and are they on board with it all now, or are they?
Absolutely. I mean, very supportive. But like, for example, the fact that there's my GP has just recently, well, I have asked her because I know that my medical certificate, so, I've got the things on my license, but then I've also got a requirement to have a medical certificate. And so my GP is responsible for filling that out. And, she quite rightly, I think, has said to me, how am I supposed to do this when I don't see you driving? She's very supportive and wants, but she wants to do the right thing. And so I guess that's a great question. I don't know the answer to that either. I don't know if either of you have got a comment. But yeah, how can I help my GP feel comfortable to sign off on my medical certificate?
That's
I
a
think there's
very interesting topic.
Yeah, I think it's there's a lot that we could deep dive into the nitty-gritty. I think and it's going to vary depending on the person's circumstances, of course, and for anyone else in that situation. I think the short answer, to be 100% sure, is an on-road with the driving OT.
Okay.
Yeah, without pumping ourselves up too much, and it's not all about us, but
No, well,
yeah,
I
the
think
GP doesn't see you drive.
no.
I think there's some common sense in discussing with someone like yourself, Anne, that you're very aware of your abilities and challenges and limitations, and looking at your overall. So we're looking at your muscular dystrophy, but also the GP is responsible for looking at your overall medical health as well. So it's not just the disability. It's are there any other medical conditions and medications that you just have because you're a human person.
Yep.
And in terms of your muscular dystrophy, that you've been through quite thorough driving assessment processes previously when you've got your last set of hand controls, that the GPs should have access to those reports, and they should be able to have a look at, well, what was your level of, and yourself, what was your level of function at that point? What's your level of function like now? Have there been any changes? And there's no stopping the GP from running through a quick movement assessment there in her clinic with you. Like, can you still turn your head? Can you still lift your arms up? Show me how you use your simulate the action of using your controls. Are you still able to do all of those movements? You still have that strength and coordination. From a cognitive perspective, where talking with you and emailing with you to organize this podcast recording, and so there's no concerns from a cognitive perspective for you, but GPs can certainly do those screeners with their other patients to check that there's been no changes with that side of things, and of course you do all your vision side of things. So I think the common sense answer is, if there's no changes in your function, then there's no real, the OT driving assessment process is always there and available to do a check if the GP is not sure.
Yeah.
But if everything's stable, and those controls are still working for you, there's been no incidences, no near misses, and you've got no concerns, then I think it's really a matter of, signing the medical certificate again and coming back again in 12 months.
There's no doubt it's a difficult decision for the doctors, because they don't actually get to see you drive unless they have a sticky beak out the window and can see the car park. That's about all they could be able to see. So it is a difficult decision. They've got the medical guidelines, the Ostroad medical guidelines to go by, which highlight the things to look out for. And then if there is a concern around those, then they should go digging a little bit deeper. And what they might do is, like Jenny said, look at previous reports of how they're going, and has function changed since that point of time. If it has significantly changed, or there's a concern, then they should reach out for help with an expert opinion, or a focused opinion, we should say, with APRA, that it is maybe a referral to an OT for a review or a deeper look into that functional side. Talking about function, let's not get too caught up on that discussion, because we want to talk about you and your function. The
driving side.
Yeah, what does driving look like for you? So how are you driving now? What does drive?
I'd like to know what driving.
You're going to go the other way.
Yeah.
Oh.
I'd like to know what it looked like. Like you talked before, and about noticing some challenges back sort of that 2016 when you've got your first set of hand controls. Like, so you're noticing challenges with your driving at that time in terms of fatigue and getting your feet between the pedals and things.
Yep.
perhaps some safety issues starting to, present themselves.
Yep.
If we can't brake, that's the problem. So what did driving look like in that first transition for you?
Okay, so after I got the hand controls.
Well, what type of hand controls did you get initially?
So at that stage, I had a Mazda Tribute. So it was ideal in all sorts of ways, in that nice height to get in and out of, I was still able to do that at the time. So what we organized at that stage was a over-ring accelerator. So that's a ring that sits over the top of the steering wheel and that I can press, no matter where we're at on this with the steering wheel, and a handbrake lever. And that was fabulous. I really thought when we made the change, I was thinking, this is going to be so hard. My feet are going to be wanting to work and, all of that. Once we put the hand controls in, it was like my legs said, thank you, we're done. And I never had any of the kind of, I want to press. No, it was, I'm very happy to have gone to the hand controls.
I love that.
So it was a revelation. It really was, to have things that easy again. And at that stage, I had a lift on the back of the car, outside, on the back of the car, that I could put my scooter onto. And so it would, I'd ride my scooter around the back, link it into the V-shaped bracket, and press a button, it would go up on the outside of the back of the car. And then I would make my way round from the back of the car to the driver's door and get in from there. And that worked really well for, how long would that have been? So I got it was called a tri-lift in 2004. And then by 2019, so it was 15 years I had that set up. But it was getting really, really hard to get from the back of the car, where the scooter went on, round to the door.
The Mazda Tribute, for people that don't know that era of car, it's not a four-wheel drive, it's a smaller four-wheel drive, an SUV type of thing, a bit like people know a Toyota RAV4 now, that type of scenario. So you weren't lifting it into the boot, it was on the outside of the boot?
It was on the outside.
Yeah. Was there a choice in why you did it that way compared to trying to get a lifter into the boot?
It was, at that stage, that was I didn't have to take anything apart. I didn't have to move anything. It was absolutely fabulous, except when it rained. And
Scooter got wet?
Scooter got wet, or I had to try and put a cover on it. And, we had good covers and everything. But by the end of that time, I was struggling so much to get the cover on and off as well. And so for me, one of the amazing things about shifting to the van, where I drive in my wheelchair, we'll talk about that some more, I'm sure, is not having to worry about the weather. Because every time I looked out the window and there was any chance of it raining, my stress levels would go through the ceiling. Because how was I going to manage? Was the scooter going to get wet? Was I going to fall? Trying to get it on and off and getting around the car. It got very stressful.
And you would have gotten soaked like that. The time it would have taken for you to be standing and balancing at the back of the car and trying to struggle getting this cover on, and then make your way back up to the driver's
seat. There was nothing good about it in the end.
And in Queensland, there's been, we get a lot of storms and come summertime, and we're recording on the 3rd of December right now. And it has been wet. So I can, even just darting to and from the car at the weekend in thunderstorm, in a 20-second dart, I got soaked. So
Yeah.
I can only imagine what you went through. Yeah.
So I just want to go back. I don't know if you're still driving with the O-ring now, but the O-ring in itself is a very interesting choice in regards to hand control, because it's not one of the most popular hand controls that we see in Australia. There's different types of hand controls, but the O-ring is a very unique way of driving. It's basically a second steering wheel on top of the steering wheel, and you squeeze it together with the thumbs, the pads of your thumbs, and squeezing it together for your accelerator. Did you have to adjust the way that you steered, or you a push-pull steerer and it just came naturally, or
It came
how did you go with it?
naturally. Yeah.
Yeah.
And in fact, that was the reason I chose it, was that it just made sense, and it just kind of worked. So, I mean, in hindsight, I don't know whether if at that stage that was, there weren't a lot of choices. Well, there were fewer choices. And maybe the trials that I did weren't, ideal, but it made sense to me.
Of the things you trialed, that made most sense. Yeah.
That's what it's about. It's about trialing things that feel good for you, for sure.
Yeah.
That's great. And whoever the OT was at that point of time, you had an OT at that time, or was it just your drivers?
I did.
Yeah. Yeah, well, shout out to the OT at that time for giving that option and giving it a go, because it's obviously worked for you. Are you still driving with that type of hand control now?
I am.
Yeah, the over.
Yeah.
Great. So let's talk about the progression then from the tribute to what you're doing now. So what's the big differences?
So the big difference is that when we looked at what I needed in making this transition, it wasn't going to be ideal for me to need to transfer. That was going to become fairly difficult fairly fast. So we recognized that we needed to do something where I could stay in a wheelchair. And actually, that was an interesting process. I had one OT dealing with the wheelchair and one OT dealing with the driving stuff. And obviously, very close coordination was needed to make sure that the chair was suitable for me, and at the same time that it would work with the driving situation that we were looking at. So what we ended up doing was moving to a situation with all automated. The tailgate goes up on the van that I have. It's the VW multivan, a T6. The tailgate goes up, a ramp folds down, swings down. I ride up into the van in my wheelchair and go straight into the driving position. So directly in front of the steering wheel. And there's a docking station sort of just in front of the steering wheel on the floor. And my wheelchair locks into that.
And then you've got your O-ring and your brake lever, and off you go.
That's the one.
It sounds all simple, but I'm sure a lot went into it. Were you using a manual wheelchair at the time, or was this your first power wheelchair?
This was, I had a small sort of foldable wheelchair that I was using up until then, but it was definitely time to make the change to, a larger powered wheelchair. And so it was those two things, I guess unsurprisingly in a way, were happening at the same time. The need to go to the larger powered wheelchair and the driving stuff.
Were you doing any walking other than getting from the boot of your car to the driver's seat? Were you really doing much other walking at that period of time, or was that the
No.
last bit of
So
walking you were kind of doing?
It really was.
Yeah.
And so, I can still wait there. Until fairly recently, I was able to take a few steps if I had a grab rail. No, we're not doing that anymore either. So, again, things continue to change. But it's been a case of, back with setting up the van, I was having my on my bathroom adapted at the same time, trying to look ahead and saying, this isn't just for now, but obviously we want to get a really good lifetime out of these things that we're doing and the money that we're spending. And so, let's look ahead and make sure this is going to continue to work. And on both of those fronts, that's certainly been the case.
How's the...
You go.
Oh, we've got so many questions.
So many questions. Too many.
So yeah, I that looking ahead is something that we talk to all of our clients about all the time, and I'm so glad that you brought that up. And the cost that goes along with that.
Yeah.
So you've had NDIS this time around to do these big projects.
Yeah.
What has that process been like for you going through the NDIS?
Yeah.
Interesting as that question is, that was my question and you stole it from me. Go in.
Don't argue now. Look, I suspect, like a lot of people, I've got a love-hate relationship with the NDIS. So I am so grateful. This van, we had to purchase the van, obviously, but the modifications were funded and the wheelchair was funded. My bathroom was, largely funded. Wow. And those things have been life-changing. They have made an incredible difference in my life. The process of getting there has been, is excruciating. It's been opaque. It feels like the goalposts move all the time. I've just recently got a hoist to get in and out of my pool. We got 4 different responses. And each time had to respond to some different set of requirements. And back in terms of getting the van modifications done, it was months of, responding and not really knowing what the outcome was going to be. So pretty grueling.
What were some of the questions that were coming to you with regards to the van mods?
So one of them was, is this going to continue to be useful? Are you really going to continue to drive and to, get out and about and be a person? So it was, and that was tricky, because you're trying to say to them, I'm disabled enough to really need this, but I'm going to continue to use it because I've got a life to live. So you're kind of toing and froing and trying to find just the right answer for them, telling the truth, of course, but nevertheless trying to express that in ways that, weren't going to lead to a rejection of the application.
And when it takes months and months and months for them to provide a response, you're struggling in the meantime with what you've got, which, is potentially getting more dangerous and dangerous.
It certainly was in my situation. It's not safe by the end for me to be getting around the car.
How debilitating, I was going to say, how debilitating was that at that point of time? Like when you were
it meant
saying
that
it
I
was raining,
Yeah.
your poor
I wasn't
wrist.
going out a lot.
Yeah.
So it
And what was that?
really meant that, I would think very carefully about whether or not I needed to go out and whether the situation in which I was going to park was one where I would feel safe. There wasn't gravel underfoot, because that, would just significantly increase my risk of a fall. So, in the end, there was an awful lot of stuff I wasn't doing away from home because I couldn't risk it.
What was that like for your mental health at that point in time?
Oh, not great.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Really.
You're a very active person now that you've got your van.
Yeah.
With the list of stuff that you mentioned at the start in regards to church and so forth,
Yeah.
a significant amount of stuff that you're doing at 64 still. Sorry, that sounds bad still, but that's great that you're able to do so much, and then just to be restricted from that, knowing that you could do it. Oh,
If
I
you
couldn't
have the
imagine.
right setup, yeah.
That's what we need to advocate to the NDIS right now in this current point in time when there's a lot happening. How long do you think it took from exploring, I need another option here because this isn't safe, to actually getting your van and hitting the road for the first time?
It would have been about 2 years.
Yeah, that's the story
total.
that we're getting consistently.
And I gather we actually bumped into so my van modifications were done by Auto Mobility down in Melbourne. And we ran into them at the Disability Expo up here in Brisbane a couple of weeks back. And they were saying it's even longer now. And there are more complications in terms of what vehicles are available for the modifications and those sorts of things. So again, I'm so grateful that we got it done when we did.
Multivan that you've got, the T6, is being phased out as we record this, and it's going to have a real significant impact through the next period in regards to, well, one, we know there's a lot of applications sitting there waiting and waiting to be approved, and being able to then get the van for the modifications if it does get approved.
Yeah.
It's going to be extremely tricky, and it's going to be a real testy period. So as we record this, it's the end of 2024, and 2025 looks really, really quite sketchy for people who are waiting for approvals to come through. And with all the changes with the NDIS at the moment, delays are significant. So watch this space, and I'm sure we'll report on it a lot next year as 2025 unpacks itself, and we start learning what the changes are to the NDIS as they happen with the reform bill, and what kind of impact that's having on drivers for sure.
And we've been talking about the mods, and it's you said life changing. So with you have been lucky enough. It's not the right words, but I can't find.
But
you have been able to get a vehicle that really solves all of the challenges that you are having, and you got the vehicle in the time that the vehicles were available. Through COVID, it was still heaps.
It was pretty hairy, but we got there.
Heaps of hoops that you had to jump through to get your NDIS approved. You had to get the woods done in Melbourne, and so there were lots and lots of hoops that you jumped through along the way. But you said it has changed your life. Can you tell us how? What have you been able to do since you've got the van? And what does your life look like now?
So it looks like just having choice, being able to do the baseline stuff like get to work, go out to visit family and all those sorts of things. But it's about having the choice to go, okay, now today's the day to go to the shops and, find Christmas presents for the grandkids and those sorts of things, and just being able to do it. So to get in the van and go where I want to go. One other thing that we haven't said is that in my van, I've also got the option for my husband to drive, and I can sit in the front passenger seat. which is also fabulous because
You
for
mean
longer
sit in the front
trips.
passenger seat or the front passenger position?
Position, yes,
Yeah.
still in my wheelchair.
Yeah.
So for longer trips, when that I'm not going to want to do a long drive, he can drive and I can sit beside him as I normally would.
We need to unpack this. For any NDIS delegate that's listening to this, or an LAC, or a support coordinator, or anybody helping somebody else out like Anne in the same situation, how important is it that you share the driving with somebody else? I mean, just for me as an able-bodied person, married person, our car swaps between drivers all the time. I'll put my hand up when I have had too much to drink. I like my wife to be able to drive and we get home safely.
Yeah.
That's me. I just want to be safe, but sometimes I'll feel tired or I want to swap drivers.
Yeah.
How important is it to you, Anne, in your situation and with your life and what cards you have been dealt? How important is it to be able to share driving in your situation?
Incredibly important. I mean, we had always done that. But generally, if we were both in the car, my husband would do the driving. It was just my son and daughter-in-law the other way around. She does most of the driving. But this is primarily my vehicle. It's also the vehicle. If we're going out together, we've got to use this vehicle.
Yeah.
And so there are all sorts of times when if the situation was different, if we didn't have the modification, he would be driving. And as I say, especially for longer trips, the fatigue with my condition is significant. And so for me not to have to front up to that and do hours of driving, if we're doing a longer trip.
Have you done any longer road trips since you've had the van?
Well, the first one was coming home from Melbourne in the midst of COVID, dodging, state closures and lockdowns and everything. And we've done some longer trips as well. And because I've got a comfortable wheelchair with a recline and that, I can sit in the front passenger position and be really comfortable to do that.
And I don't know, you don't have to sit in that situation, but what would it be like if you were not able to sit in the front next to your husband who was driving? What would it feel like, do you think, sitting in the rear of the car? What difference do you think that would make? It'd be horrible. Why do you think it would be horrible?
It's just not what you do. And I mean, after 43 years of marriage, we're still talking to one another and we like to talk to one another.
That's encouraging.
And so, yeah, it's just what you do. And this is the thing, expressing this sense of, as far as possible, to keep life normal, in inverted commas, to keep relationships, on that standard keel. I mean, my husband is wonderful. He does so much to help, but he's still my husband first, and my helper after that. So yeah, just normal stuff.
There's cost saving, and then there's looking at somebody as a human and how humans interact with each other. And it's something that I advocate strongly for in the practice that I do. And I know Jenny is the same as an OT up there as well. It's the holistic viewpoint as OTs that we really strongly advocate for, and that includes the mental health, the social well-being, the other elements of human life that just aren't money factors about how much something might cost, because we don't want our people to end up in hospital with mental health conditions or prescribing a van that they're not going to use because they just don't like it, because they don't like sitting in the back away from people. There's a whole lot of stuff that goes into these decisions, more than just how much it costs, because it's been great listening to you and say that it's a husband first, and you're still talking to each other after 43 years, and that you've still got a strong relationship, and that's really important, to be at the same level in the car and talking to each other and sharing each other's companionship next to each other, side by side. Those are really important factors.
I think the human side is, I think as OTs, we do our best to work with our clients to really showcase that, and showcase, the things that will let you do. And I think you're a wonderful example, Anne, of, well, yes, this vehicle modification, look at what it's let you return to all your normal daily activities, to go out as whenever you want to keep being able to be working with your role as a lecturer and as a supervisor and mentor. It's kept you connected to your family and seeing them, and like you said, going Christmas present shopping for the grannies and the new grandbaby. And also, of course, getting to all of your health appointments. But I think, and I don't know. My impression of the NDIS is that they're losing touch more and more with the human side of things, and they only understand dollars. But what they've got to consider is that all of those things that you're doing is contributing to the economy.
Gives back to the economy.
You're working, you're spending, you're taking care of yourself, you're preventing longer term health problems and challenges. You're preventing hospital and healthcare costs. Like,
you're giving back. Well, you're giving back to the community, instead of, if these things aren't approved, then you're going to be taking from the community a lot more. You're going to be more carers, more hospital admissions, more mental health conditions, more psychology, more, you name it. We can't prove it because we're not talking to somebody that is missing out at the moment. But the likelihood is that you would be taking from the community a lot more than you would be giving back to the community, which you're doing now, Anne, and able to contribute so much to the people that need it around, involved in your life. It's amazing.
And it's wonderful. I think that's a real investment, and they've got to recognise that, yes, giving that investment to you, but that gratitude to you that you're using that and what you're doing with it is wonderful.
Well, one thing I was going to raise as a something that we've had to work through is the ongoing maintenance of the van.
I'm glad.
And what that looks like. Because, as you were saying, Jenny, the modifications were done down in Melbourne. Absolutely fabulous. But there have been issues, and we kind of suspected it might be the case. Once you've got a modified vehicle, the manufacturer of the vehicle says, oh, we can't work on that because it's modified. And that applies whether the problem is with the modifications or not. And so and we have had some issues, just, things that break down after time. I was going to say the best thing that we have found in trying to deal with those issues is to find a good local mechanic. So we found somebody just round the road, which is great, because when I drop the van off for, a service or to have work done on it, I can just ride home on my wheelchair. So that's great. But the other thing is that they're not fazed by that. Oh, is this a modification issue, or is this the vehicle issue? And so, yeah, we've only recently done that because we were having some issues and having trouble getting the support that we needed to work through those. And yeah, we have now got a local mechanic who is, a real mechanic still, and prepared to do the work on the vehicle. So, that's been a bit of a tricky one to work through. And as you can imagine, when you've got a van and, we've had times when it's been off the road with various issues. So being able to get it fixed and have somebody willing to work on it has been really important.
Van does get cut apart and put back together.
Yeah.
Nothing really about the engine bay, although they look at
No.
hand controls and they go that sometimes mechanics can freak out, especially if it's a Volkswagen dealership and so forth, or you've tinkered with how it works, so we're not going to touch it anymore. I hear what you're saying, and it is a bit of a common story. So that's a tip I'm going to take away and utilize with my clients as well for further advice is that, your local around the corner, smaller mechanic might be the best way to go. The one that is good old fashioned service might be the way to go. That's a really good tip, and thank you very much. Well, if there's anyone that's following in your footsteps, Anne, as we start to wind this up, have you got any other advice through this process from car mods to van mods? Have you got any other tips that you can give to anyone following who wants to maybe consider making this journey from a car with modifications through to a higher level van with wheelchair access?
Yeah. Do it. It really does make a difference. And I guess, it's always fronting up and starting to ask the questions. These are the difficulties I'm now having. What are the solutions that are out there? Talking to an OT, and somebody who specializes obviously in the kind of area that you're interested in this case, driving. Start having the conversations. Sometimes even that's hard to do, it feels kind of threatening and difficult, but it is so worthwhile. And to start now, because it's going to be quite a while before you get what you need. So yeah, do it and do it now. Do it sooner rather than later.
So that's been eye-opening. We're not going to let you go yet. What we're going to do is we're going to go and hear from our sponsors that make this show possible, and we'll come back and ask you our final question.
Williams Occupational Therapy focus their attention on helping people with their mobility needs. From driving to wheelchairs, Williams OT provides help to get people mobile.
Thank you, Anne, again, so much for your time in recording this episode today. Our 100th episode. It's been really, really special to have a client that's been through such transitions with their driving, and you've gone from driving a car unmodified to driving with hand controls to then transitioning to your van where you've got your drive from wheelchair set up. And I'm really grateful that you're able to share your insights around the challenges that you've had, but also that perseverance and tenacity, and just do it, because it's going to take a long time. We're going to finish up our with our question that we ask with all of our guests at the end of every episode, because we know that driving's more than just driving from A to B, and cars are more about driving from A to B. They bring so much more, and we've already touched on that quite a bit throughout this discussion with you. But can you tell us something, a highlight, a special memory that really stands out for you that's to do with a car?
Yeah, well, my mind immediately goes back to the trip home from Melbourne when we went down to pick up the van. So, of course, lots of excitement, lots of, oh my goodness, this is finally happening. And we picked up the car. I did some of the driving on the way home, which was great because, I was comfortable enough straight away to be doing that. We'd spent a lot of time setting everything up and that. So I did some of the driving, and then Pete was able to do some of the driving as well, my husband. And there were a couple of highlights on that trip. One is kind of sad, but it was also wonderful, which was that as we drove through, we'd had a 2-week window when the state borders weren't locked down. And as we drove home, I said to Pete, let's pop in and see my sister. And we did, and we had a delightful afternoon tea. She'd been struggling with illness for quite a while by then. And because of the lockdowns and everything, that was actually the last time I saw her. So there was an extra special sense to that trip home that came with that. And then on a lighter note, we got as far as just south of the Queensland border, and we're going to stop overnight so we'd be fresh for the next day. We got out of the van, got unpacked, settled in, and they announced that the Queensland border was going to close again. So we threw everything back in the van and drove the rest of the way home. Do you remember those days, when it was like, what's happening today? What do we need to do? So that we were very grateful to have made it over the border. But the van was a delight to travel in, right from the beginning, with being able to share the driving, have that wonderful visit with my sister, and then being able to get home when we needed to, all in comfort.
Oh, so wonderful, Anne. Thank you so much. Yes, those were trying times for everybody.
They certainly were, weren't they?
So I think we're finishing up with our interview with you there. And is there any way people are interested in reaching out to you or hearing more about your story? Is there any way they can get in contact with you?
Probably the easiest thing would be for them to get in touch with one of you. You've got my contact details. Very happy to hear from people and for you to send that through.
Wonderful.
So if you've got a question, put it down below in the comments section. Put it down in the comment section wherever you're listening through to this. We'll see it. We'll forward it on to Anne, and we'll link you up and put you in contact. And thank you so much from my behalf. Those stories that you're sharing and being vulnerable and coming on and giving tips to other people that might have to go through something similar to yourself about making a decision of when it's, when is it time to actually do that, with a progressive condition, like making that decision of just doing it. Thank you for sharing that. Thank you also for sharing about those stories of the progression and working with the NDIS and getting your story across to them as well, so they can see that you're a human and not a dollar figure, and presenting that meaningfulness behind all these decisions that you're going through, and sharing it with us as well, because I'm sure a lot of people will get some gold nuggets out of it. Like I have my gold nuggets, but someone else, Jenny, will have her little gold nuggets that are different to mine, and I'm sure someone will find this extremely interesting and utilize it in their quest to become independent or maintain that independence through driving. It's been a fantastic chat. Thank you.
Thank you.
Very welcome.
I'm sure people will really utilize that one. The emotional side of it was really good. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Anne.
You are both very welcome. Keep up the good work.
Well, you too.
Yeah.
You too.
Thank you.
And stay dry up there.
It's wonderful.
All right.
Stay dry too, Ed. Bye-bye.
Driving Well Occupational Therapy loves working with people of all ages and with all kinds of medical conditions to safely give them the opportunity to explore their driving goals. As we wind up this episode, please remember that the advice provided in this podcast is general in nature. For your specific situation, you will need to get in contact with your local OT, vehicle modifier or mobility dealer and set yourself up with an assessment or trial. Trials really do put you in that driver's seat.
If you like what you've heard, make sure you like, rate and subscribe. It really does make a massive difference. If you or anyone you know would like to share a story about driving with a disability, or you would like to get in contact, find the show notes, or find the resources mentioned in this episode, you can find us on Facebook. Just search @DriveAble Podcast for more information.